If you're a go-to-market leader or practitioner in the B2B space who's trying to keep up with all the AI noise right now, well, this episode is for you. Now, there's no question about whether AI matters. You already know it matters. What most go-to-market teams are navigating with AI is something much more grounded and much more practical. It's not a strategy problem, it's a starting point problem. Because when everything feels urgent, it gets hard to see what actually matters. So the real questions become, where do we start? What do we fix first? What's worth doing now? And what's just more noise, more pressure, and more distraction? And honestly, those are the better questions, because a lot of smart go-to-market teams are feeling that same tension right now. There's pressure from the market, pressure from leadership, pressure from the board, from peers, and from your own team, because everybody can feel the ground shifting. And when all of that pressure shows up at once, well, it becomes very easy to mistake motion for progress, to add tools, to run pilots, to test prompts, to talk about agents, to generate more content, and to push out more outbound, and call this all innovation. But let's be honest, does any of that make you feel more confident about how your go-to-market motion is actually working? Does it make you clearer about what's producing pipeline? And does it make you more aligned across marketing, sales, and leadership? Does it make the system feel cleaner, more efficient, and more trustworthy? For most teams, sadly, the answer is a resounding no. So today, I want to get real about your go-to-market motions, because if you layer AI on top of a motion that's unclear, disconnected, hard to trust, or poorly owned, you don't get leverage. You just go in circles faster. So because this is the first Real Talk episode, I want to simplify the madness. I'm going to walk through where go-to-market leaders and practitioners should actually start when it comes to leveraging AI in the revenue motion. And that means I'll walk you through the framework I use to diagnose the right starting point and the 4 most common paths teams should take in the first 90 days after they decide to move from a revenue motion to a revenue AI motion. Now, the first question usually revolves around, what tools should we use? But the better question is, where is our go-to-market motion actually getting stuck? And what has to be true before AI can genuinely help? Welcome to RevAI Real Talk B2B GTM, where we have honest conversations at the intersection of revenue AI, go-to-market systems, and real-world execution with leaders and practitioners across sales, RevOps, and marketing. I'm Nikke Rose, and this show is where we get real about your go-to-market motion. Not the polished version, not the conference talk version, not the version where everybody sounds certain, but nobody's dealing with the actual mess. I mean, the real version, the grit that no one really likes to talk about. For instance, where pipe gen lags, where systems stop talking to each other, where account signals are scattered, where teams lose trust in the data, and where the handoffs break. How about where everyone wants AI to help, but not enough people have stopped long enough to decide what should happen first, what should wait, and who's actually going to own it? Now, I've spent the last 2 decades in go-to-market in B2B SaaS, so I know these challenges from the front lines of growth. And this show is for go-to-market leaders and practitioners who want practical, no-hype conversations about revenue AI. We'll talk about pipeline generation, signal quality, data trust, attribution, systems over stacks, workflows, and adoption and change. No vague futurism, no vendor pitches, and no soft thought leadership. Just practical ways to make your go-to-market motion clearer, faster, and more trustworthy. So let's start with the mistake I see most often. Most teams start too high in the stack. They start with the tool conversation, the platform conversation, or the agent conversation. And they start with questions like, should we automate our outbound? Or should we use AI for account research? Or should I build a co-pilot for that? And look, just to be clear, those aren't bad questions. They're just not the right first questions. Because when you start there, you can skip the part that determines whether any of this is actually going to work. You skip the bottleneck, you skip the trust layer, you skip the workflow design, and you skip the ownership model. Once that happens, one of 4 things usually follows. 1, you add more tools, but the go-to-market motion is still messy. Now your team has more screens, more dashboards, more data, and somehow still they have less clarity. 2, you automate a weak process so the weakness just moves around faster. Now, instead of doing something poorly by hand, you're doing it poorly at scale. 3, the output looks good, but the team doesn't really trust it. So you have a summary that looks good, the account brief looks great, and the score looks promising. But somebody's still out there thinking, I'm not really sure I believe this. And once trust drops, usage usually follows. Or 4, the pilot launches, people get excited for a couple of weeks, and then it fades. Not because the idea was terrible, but because no one owned the behavior. No one reinforced the workflow. No one cleaned up the edge cases. And no one defined success. And no one made it part of how the team actually operates. So here's the shift I want you to hear clearly. Revenue AI isn't a tool-first decision, it's a sequencing decision. It's a revenue system decision. And the teams that get real value from AI usually do one thing very well early. They get honest about where the go-to-market motion is actually breaking. Not where the buzz is, not where the vendor demo is strongest, and not where the market conversation is loudest. Where the motion is actually breaking. So before we talk about where to start, we need a simple framework. Not to make this feel more complex, but just to help you diagnose more clearly so that the next 90 days don't become a pile of disconnected experiments. So there are 4 lenses I want you to look through first. Lens 1 is the commercial bottleneck. This is the first lens because it grounds everything else. And when I say commercial bottleneck, I mean the specific place in your motion where revenue is getting slowed down, lost, delayed, or made more expensive. This isn't abstract. In most companies, it sounds like one of these things. We're getting engagement and activity, but not enough qualified pipeline. Or we have target accounts engaging, but sales isn't acting on the right ones fast enough. Or our signals are scattered, so prioritization still feels subjective. Or handoffs between marketing, SDRs, and sales are messy, so momentum gets lost. And another, leadership still can't clearly see which plays are actually producing pipeline. Those are commercial bottlenecks, and different bottlenecks point to different starting points. If your problem is pipeline creation, you probably shouldn't begin with internal note summarization. If your problem is inconsistent routing, you probably don't need a shiny new layer on top, you need a cleaner logic underneath. If your problem is weak visibility into what's working, well, you probably need a better measurement before you add any more complexity. So your first job is more or less pretty simple. Name the bottleneck in plain English. Where exactly is your go-to-market motion getting stuck? Is it at the account selection, the signal interpretation, routing, follow-up, handoff, measurement? Look, if you can't answer that clearly, you're too early to prioritize AI well. All right, let's look through lens 2. This is data and system trust. This is the layer that a lot of teams want to rush past because, well, it feels less exciting than workflows, agents, and automation, let's be honest. But this is where trust gets won or lost. Questions to ask here should be things like, does your lifecycle stages mean the same thing across marketing, sales, and RevOps? Are the right fields being filled in? Do duplicates create noise? Are account owners clear? Can your team tell the difference between a meaningful signal and noisy activity? Do intent data, website behavior, form fills, email replies, campaign engagement, and CRM contacts actually connect in a way that the team can use? Well, you have to also ask if different teams are looking at the same account and they're seeing the same basic reality. This is the key point. You don't need perfect data. Perfect data isn't the bar. The bar is decision-grade trust. Can the team trust the system enough to prioritize accounts, route the work, personalize responsibly, and measure what changed? Because if the answer is no, AI will not solve that for you either. It may make the output look cleaner, it may make the dashboards look sharper, but polished confusion is still confusion. And that's dangerous because when output looks smart, teams can overtrust them. So you've got to know what in your system is trustworthy, what's inconsistent, what's incomplete, and what's missing enough context that AI would probably amplify that problem. All right, let's move into looking through lens number 3. This is the workflow fit. This is where you ask, what work should AI actually touch first? Not every workflow is ready, not every workflow is worth it, and not every workflow should be automated. The best early workflow to work with usually have a few things in common. They happen often, they have repeatable inputs, they create friction today, they consume time people shouldn't be wasting, and they can be improved without putting trust at risk. Now that might look like triaging inbound or account signals, or assembling a first pass research brief, possibly pulling meeting prep context, or maybe cleaning and enriching lists. How about routing follow-ups or preparing better handoff context so teams don't start from scratch every time? Those are very different decisions from saying, hey, let's put AI directly in front of prospects, like handling outreach and messaging and conversations without any guardrails. A good early workflow creates leverage without creating chaos. So instead of asking, what's the most impressive use case we could show with AI, you ask, where do we have repeated friction, clear inputs, and a workflow that can improve meaningfully without breaking trust? Now that's a much better filter. All right, let's look through lens 4, which is ownership and adoption. Now, this is the one that quietly kills a lot of great ideas. Because even if the use case is sensible, and even if the data is usable, and look, even if the workflow is real, if it stalls, if no one owns the motion, then who's accountable for the outcome? And who approves the workflow, maintains the logic, checks the quality, trains the team, measures success? Who decides what happens next if the pilot works? And who decides what gets shut down if it doesn't? If those answers are vague, the initiative becomes everyone's side project, and everyone's side project usually becomes nobody's operating system. So that's why I push leaders to think in operating model terms, not just implementation terms. Because the goal isn't to launch something interesting. The goal is to create a trusted, repeatable, owned way of working. So those are the 4 lenses: commercial bottleneck, data and system trust, workflow fit, and ownership and adoption. And once you run your go-to-market motion through those 4 lenses, most teams land in one of 4 starting paths. All right, so let's talk about those starting paths. There are 4 starting paths. One is fixed signal and visibility. You start here if your team keeps arguing about which accounts matter, which activity is meaningful, or who should follow up. If prioritization still feels subjective, or marketing, SDRs, and sales are looking at different pictures, this is probably your path. And the work here isn't glamorous. It's getting clear about signal definitions, signal sources, shared account visibility, routing rules, and next best action logic. Because when signal and visibility are weak, people don't just miss opportunities, they waste time on pursuing the wrong ones. All right, starting path number 2 is fix the trust layer underneath execution. You start here if the team keeps bumping into some version of the data is off, I don't trust that field, I'm not sure account ownership is right, we're reporting one way but operating another. If that's happening, you don't just have a reporting problem, you have a trust problem. And trust problems show up everywhere. In routing, prioritization, attribution, personalization, and in decision making. This is where you tighten core definitions, critical objects like the account object or company object, required fields, duplicate logic, ownership rules, and the small number of data points that actually drive action. You don't need perfect data, but what you do need is the team to trust the system enough to move with confidence. All right, let's look at starting path 3, which is improve one high friction workflow. This is the best starting point for teams that are clearly losing time to repeatable manual work. Maybe there's too much manual account research. Maybe inbound follow-up takes too long because enrichment, context gathering, and routing are slow. Maybe marketing to sales handoff prep is inconsistent. Maybe managers are rebuilding the same meeting context over and over again. And that's where a focused workflow win can create real leverage. But the important word there is focused, not let's automate half the funnel. Instead, pick one workflow, define the input, define the desired output, define the quality bar, define who checks it, then improve that one motion first. The best first workflow is usually not the one that sounds most futuristic. It's the one that reduces friction without increasing risk. All right, and lastly, starting path 4, align leadership around priorities and ownership. Now, this path is more common than people want to admit, because sometimes the real issue isn't the workflow, the data, or the signal. It's that leadership hasn't aligned on what comes first. So the CEO or founder wants momentum, the CRO wants more pipeline, the CMO wants clear attribution, RevOps wants cleaner definitions, and sales wants faster follow-up. All of those asks make sense, but if nobody has decided what the first real priority is, you don't get a sequence, you get a pile of disconnected asks. And that's exactly how teams end up running multiple initiatives, feeling active, and still not creating clarity. So if that sounds familiar, your first move isn't another experiment, it's alignment. What's the actual goal? What's the actual bottleneck? What's the first motion? What are we not doing yet? Who owns it? And what does success look like 90 days from now? That kind of clarity creates momentum a lot faster than scattered activity ever will. So let's make this even more practical. If your team argues most often about which accounts matter, which activity is meaningful, or who should follow up, you probably have a signal and visibility problem. If your team argues most often about data quality, field trust, report accuracy, or source of truth questions, you probably have a trust layer problem. If your team knows what the problem is, but people are still wasting hours inside the same repeated manual process, you probably have a workflow problem. And if your team keeps circling with great ideas, but no sequence, no owner, no shared definition of success, well, you probably have an alignment problem. And yes, some companies have more than one of these. Actually, most do. But you still have to choose the first move, because trying to solve all four at once usually recreates the same problem, just in a more expensive form. So now, when I say the first 90 days, I mean the first 90 days after you decide you're actually going to move forward with AI in your revenue motion, aka Revenue AI, and not just talk about it. And I'd think about those first 90 days in 3 phases. So break it down into diagnose, narrow, and then build and learn. So with phase 1, diagnose, you want to slow down enough to see clearly. You want to name the bottleneck, you want to audit the trust layer, and look at where the work is getting stuck. Map the workflow, clarify who owns what today, and be honest about what isn't ready yet. This phase is about clarity, not activity, not announcements, not tool sprawl. Clarity. Look, one of the biggest mistakes I've seen teams make here is moving too fast before they've defined the problem. If 5 leaders describe the problem in 5 different ways, well, you're not ready to scale a solution. So get the problem statement right first. And remember, clarity is kind. Alright, so then you move to phase 2 and you're going to narrow the scope. You'll choose one primary path, not 4, just one. Define what will change, define the quality bar, define the guardrails, define who owns the motion, and define how you'll know whether it's working. The teams that create momentum fastest usually aren't the ones doing the most, they're the ones reducing ambiguity fastest. Alright, then moving on to phase 3, it's about build and learn. So you want to implement a focused motion. Review it weekly, look at where trust breaks, look at where adoption drops, look at which signals actually matter and which ones were just noise. Then tighten the system from there. Version 1, of course, will not be perfect, but you're now learning inside a real go-to-market motion with a real owner against a real commercial problem. And that's very different than from experimenting in a vacuum. A lot of teams measure early AI progress poorly. They look for something dramatic, something flashy, something that feels like a transformation story right away. And early on, that's usually the wrong expectation. Good early progress often looks a lot more grounded. It looks like clear prioritization and faster routing, less wasted time and cleaner handoffs, better visibility and higher trust in the data, more consistent execution, and fewer internal debates about what to do next. That may not sound flashy, but that's exactly the kind of progress that creates leverage later. Because once the system gets clearer, more advanced use cases become safer and a whole lot more useful. So if I were going to compress all of this into one simple piece of advice, it would be this. Don't start with the loudest idea. Start with the clearest bottleneck. Then check the trust layer, then choose the workflow, then assign the owner. And that's how go-to-market leaders actually start revenue AI well. Not by trying to do everything, and not by reacting to every new feature, and not by forcing AI into a motion that's still unclear, but by getting honest, getting specific, and getting the first move right. So here's the recap. If you're trying to figure out where to start with revenue AI, don't start by chasing the newest thing. Start by asking those 4 questions. Where is the real commercial bottleneck in your go-to-market motion? Can you trust the data and the system enough to act? And can your teams as well? And which workflow is actually ready for improvement? And who owns the motion once it goes live? If you answer those 4 questions honestly, you'll get a lot clearer on whether your next step should be improving signal and visibility, or strengthening the trust layer, or fixing one high-friction workflow, or aligning leadership around priorities and ownership. And that's where real progress starts. Not in more noise, not more disconnected activity, but in a clear sequence. For a practical way to do this in your own business, I put together a free Revenue AI Readiness Snapshot. So to apply this to your own go-to-market motion and to take action on what we covered here today, comment snapshot below in this video and we'll send you the playbook. It'll help you see where your motion stands, where the friction really is, and what your smartest next steps look like. It's completely free and can go through it on demand. And in the next episode, we're going one layer deeper because once you know where to start, the next mistake teams make is assuming more tools mean more progress. And we all know it doesn't. So check out this next video where we're getting into why more tools often create more friction and what it takes to go from a stack to a system and how to build one your team can actually trust. I'll see you there. Thanks for watching.